Hi there, thanks for stopping by. Today we are going to talk about monotypes. So, monotype, what's that all about? Well, it's one of the most straightforward methods of printmaking. The things you need to get started are a shiny surface, a roller, some ink and some paper. In this video we will be using a really easy technique where you can create a monotype just from drawing and drawing quickly. But this isn't the only kind of monotype printmaking. There's additive, subtractive, there's using masks and frames. So we'll be going over those in future videos. Also, just before we get started, if you can let me know in the comments down below, does printmaking as a beginner artist make you feel a little intimidated? It's one of those art mediums that has a lot of specific terms and a lot of different techniques which sound quite complicated. But often they're not, they're really not. And they're a great way to be able to, as a beginner artist, just have fun with making art. So much of the time as beginner artists we get caught up with how we are supposed to be doing things and what other people think are important for us. But the most important thing as a beginner artist is to enjoy what you're doing and to play. Printmaking allows you to play without any pressure. You can be spontaneous, work quickly and just see what happens. Often the happy accidents that you have while you're printmaking can give you other ideas for other art you want to make in different ways. But for today, let's get started.
The shiny surface I'm using today is an old piece of glass that was left over from a broken picture frame. You could also use a piece of plastic or even work directly on the tabletop itself, if it's non-porous and you don't mind cleaning it up afterwards. First, I'm marking out a rough rectangle with masking tape here. This is absolutely optional, you don't have to do it. I just enjoy having some neat edges sometimes. It also helps me to only ink up the area I need, so saves me guessing if I've done enough. I'm using the piece of paper that I'm going to print on as my size guide. It's just a standard piece of printer paper, but part of the joy of printmaking is the experimentation, so feel free to try out different paper types to see what effects you can create. I'm using a separate tray here to roll the ink in, like using a palette, but you can just use the same surface as the one you're printing on if you like. I'm using block printing ink because I have it, but this technique will work with standard paints such as acrylics. Just remember that acrylics will dry out quicker and may stick to the paper, so you have to work faster. You really don't need much ink, just a little blob. Use a small piece of card to smear the blob into a line of ink. Then you can start rolling, pulling the ink towards you from the line to create an inky patch. As you pull back, lift your roller a little to let it spin so that whenever it lands again, a different part of it gets inky. Once you feel like your roller is covered and you have a nice inky patch to re-roll it in, you can ink up your printing area. I do have a roller to use here, but if you don't have one, don't worry. For this technique, you can use a brush and just create an even layer of ink with that too. Mine's a pretty cheap roller, so the edges hit the surface better than the centre. But by rolling in different directions, you can eventually cover the area with whatever you have. Don't worry if it's not perfectly even. Just take your time and enjoy it. So I pulled off the masking tape and placed my paper over the inky plate. Don't press down on the paper unless you want to create a mark. Every pressure will create an imprint of some kind. So as you start to draw, remember not to lean your hand on the inky area. For this first one, I'm drawing blindly. I'm using the end of a paintbrush and doodling the general shape of an animal, but I have no clear idea of what I've done or where I've been, so the result will be a pure surprise. Sometimes it's nice to try this kind of drawing because you cannot put pressure on yourself when you can't judge the outcome. This is simply doing something to see what happens. You might look at it and go, "Ah, no, it's ugly and messy." But I urge you to look at it again. Look beyond your overall composition and focus in on the marks that you've made. they will be different to any you'll have made before with other art mediums. Look at how the different pressures you used to draw have created different textures. The lines you can achieve through this technique have a dusty, mystical quality all of their own.
Word Nerd Interlude. In this video, we have been creating a monotype, but you may be wondering, what is the difference between that and a monoprint? If we split the word up, mono means one and type means kind, so it's one of a kind. It's something that cannot be replicated again. This is because the art that you are creating on your plate is something which isn't fixed. So you are inking directly onto your plate and creating art there, which only has enough ink for one perfect print. So you'll take your print, and that is the only one you'll get. You might get a second ghost print, which is just a fainter version. But either way, that first print you took is the one and only. It's unique. You will never create it again. Monoprint is slightly different. With this, you have a base plate, or what they call a matrix, which is always the same. But when you ink it up, you can ink it differently every single time. So every time you take a print from it, it's going to be slightly different. Therefore, it's a monoprint because it's one of a kind, but it has brothers and sisters from that same matrix that always stays the same. To make sense of this, I made a collagraph print from this plate. So I made the plate and the plate always stays the same. But if I ink it in a different colour, then each print will come out slightly differently. So as you can see, this one was in black ink, but then I inked it again with blue and inked it again with multiple different colours. Every single one of these prints is unique. So it's mono, it's one, but it's part of a family because it has a parent, which is the plate. And these are all siblings of that family. So these are monoprints, but the ones we've made today are monotypes. I hope that makes sense.
So now let's try drawing with a bit more guidance. Here I'm using a pencil, and because of this I'll be able to see whereabouts I have drawn on the page and can adjust my composition as I go. You can use all kinds of tools to draw with. Experiment with pens, pencils, brushes, your fingers and nails. All of them will create different effects. Also, rather than drawing freehand, if you have a photo or previous drawing that you want to recreate using this technique, you can place your image on top of the paper and trace over it. Just remember that the print will be a reverse of your original. Keep in mind as you draw that if you are using water-based ink or paint, it will be drying gradually. So don't get too bogged down with perfectionism. If you take too long, the ink may no longer transfer so well. So this is a nudge to remind you to work at speed. Now, I understand that sometimes it's hard to go fast. I personally love taking my time and getting detailed, but you'll be surprised at the effects and emotion that you can create by letting go of being careful. This scribbly freehand drawing took me about 6 minutes to do. Of course, there are lots of ways I could have spent longer on it, but I want to demonstrate that printmaking doesn't need to be a big process. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can just have a quick doodle and let your mind wander a bit while your hands do the work. Despite feeling slightly more sure about the composition this time, the final result is always going to be a surprise. And that's one of the ultimate printmaking bonuses. You'll never know exactly what's going to happen. Time for the surprise. I really like how this came out. There are lots of different tonal values, the varied light and dark shades, as well as some lovely textures. I think the scribbly nature of it gives this furry face some character too. There's a glint in the eye and a feeling of movement. If you're using water-based ink or paint, it's super easy to clean up. Just take a damp cloth or piece of kitchen towel and wipe over the plate until it's clear again. If you're using oil-based ink, you can use vegetable oil to help wipe it away. Make sure if you used a roller to clean that too before any ink hardens onto it, as you want to keep its surface smooth for next time.
Thank you so much for watching this video. It really means a lot to me that you stopped by. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps to support the channel, and please do let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Have you tried monoprint? Would you like to try it? Are you feeling slightly less intimidated by printmaking? Stick around and we will demystify everything. See you next time.